If I had $1 for every single monitor I've tested with Macs on this channel, I have about $22, which is a lot of money. You know, I could totally buy one of Apple's polishing cloths with that. But seriously, I've tested everything from cheap 1440p monitors to gaming monitors, 4K productivity monitors, or even the premium ultra-wide or 5K resolution monitors like the Apple Studio Display. So here are my totally unscripted and completely unsponsored thoughts in 2025. Now, these are, in my opinion, the most important monitor categories when it comes to purchasing a monitor. And I find that price and resolution generally go hand in hand. So let's just start with the budget stuff. Starting with 1440p, or roughly the $150 to $250 price range. Now, 1440p is kind of like the basic entry-level resolution for Macs. It's relatively inexpensive. It also scales perfectly within macOS. Now, the pixel density is obviously not as good as, say, a 4K monitor, but if you're using a 27-inch screen and you're sitting, you know, the appropriate amount of distance away, which is about 2 feet, it's really not that noticeable compared to 4K, at least in my opinion. Some of you might disagree. In the comment sections on most of these videos, the opinions are usually pretty mixed. Now, most newer 1440p monitor these days are also shipping with a higher refresh rate. So instead of the usual 60 Hertz, you're going to be getting something like 75, 90, or 120, or even say 144 Hertz, which is going to get you closer to that 120 Hertz ProMotion display on your MacBook Pro if you have an Apple Silicon MacBook Pro. I personally really like these higher refresh rate options because, especially if you're the type of person to use a MacBook next to your monitor, if you're switching between the two different screens, going from that ProMotion to then, for example, a 60 Hertz screen can be really jarring and noticeable. So, for example, a really good budget 1440p monitor is the Dell S2725DS. Now, it's 27 inches, QHD, which is another name for 1440p. Don't mind the typo here, it is a 1440p resolution. And this particular one has a 100 Hertz refresh rate. So it's not gonna get you quite up to that 120 Hertz, which is the MacBook ProMotion display, but you're not really going to be able to tell the difference. It's only, 20 Hertz. Now, this one's on sale currently for $216 US. Now, you can also get more gamer-oriented versions of these relatively budget 1440p monitors. Here's a really popular one, the LG Ultra Gear 27GL83A-B. Awful names, guys. Like, you're gonna have to bear with me with this video because this is just the beginning of these awful names. Now, this one has a 1 millisecond response time, HDR10, G-Sync. More importantly, it's 1440p and 144 Hertz. So let's also quickly look at some of the drawbacks or negatives for this relatively budget 1440p monitor category. So the biggest one for me personally is that at this price range, most of them won't have your USB-C 1 cable connectivity or any kind of built-in USB hub. Now, the importance of these things really depends on your particular setup. If you're just using a desktop Mac, like a Mac Mini or a Mac Studio, for example, it doesn't matter. But if you've got a laptop, having to constantly plug power in, plug a HDMI cable in, and then plug all of your accessories in every time you switch between having your laptop portable and having it at a desk with your monitor, it gets really annoying after a certain amount of time. And just being able to have that one cable connectivity where you just plug one cable into your laptop, you get power, charging, output to your screen, access to any of the devices plugged into the monitor. It is really, really awesome. So using my particular setup as an example, I did a desk setup video a few months ago, and I had my microphone, my speakers, a couple of other accessories all plugged into the back of the monitor, and that allowed me to connect all of that to my laptop with just one cable. Now, one noticeable exception to this is if you can bump up your budget to quite a bit more money, to be fair, about $435, you can look at something called the Dell UltraSharp U2724DE. Now, I reviewed this one a few months ago. It's an exceptionally good monitor. It's 1440p, 120 Hertz refresh rate, full USB-C 1 cable connectivity with a Thunderbolt 4 hub with a large port selection. Color accuracy is also better than the Apple Studio Display. And I will link my full review on that monitor down below if you want to check that out. Now, while we're on the topic of budget options, now is also a really good time to mention the sponsor for this section of the video, which is Tello Mobile. Tello is the service provider Big Wireless doesn't want you to know about because Tello saves you money and cuts your existing phone bill in half. Take their affordable unlimited everything plan. For just $25 a month, you can get unlimited talk and text and unlimited data on the reliable 5G and 4G LTE network that you already know. If you want to have full control over your plan, Tello's Build Your Own Plan feature allows you to select exactly how much data, calls, and texts you need each month. And don't worry, you don't need to bulk buy months in advance just to lock in the price. In addition, Tello has included popular features like free hotspot, international calls to 60+ countries, eSIM, and Wi-Fi calling. Tello is also super transparent and has unmatched flexibility. There are no contracts or hidden fees, and you can change your plan whenever you like. For example, upgrading your data allowance for 1 month if you're away from home. Plus, friendly live customer support is always just one call away if you need any help. So choose Tello for great prices and stay for the amazing service. If you want any more information, I'll add some links down below. Okay, so next up we have the 4K or roughly $250 to $500 price bracket. Now the pretty obvious pro of 4K over say 1440p is the pixel density is going to be higher. So things like text clarity and the UI elements are going to be a little bit sharper and clearer. Here's a little example between a 1440p monitor and a 4K monitor. Now do note here that if you increase the monitor size, for example, if you have a 4K 27-inch monitor versus a 4K 32-inch monitor, that same resolution on the larger 32-inch monitor is going to appear much less pixel dense, and obviously you're going to be able to see more pixelation and things like blurry text, for example. So if you're really sensitive to that, just don't go for a really big monitor. Stick to the 27-inch sizing. Now, really the only major negative of the 4K resolution, specifically with Macs, is that 4K resolution doesn't perfectly scale within macOS. So if you go into System Preferences and then Displays, and you change that scaling from say the native 4K down to 1440p, which actually makes everything on the screen easier to see and easier to read, it's not going to scale perfectly within macOS. So you will get some very minor blurriness with font and UI elements. Now, if you want a full breakdown on exactly what that is and how it might impact you, I did a much more detailed breakdown in the first 2 minutes of this video. Now, do note here that you can use third-party apps to slightly improve this scaling. For example, there's one called Better Display that's really popular. And essentially what it does is it just very slightly tweaks the scaling within macOS to slightly improve that blurriness and the way that the UI elements render on the screen. Now, even if you're not using Better Display and you've just got a standard 4K resolution monitor just on your Mac and you've set the resolution scaling to 1440p, it's not a major difference. Like, most people are probably not going to notice it at all. A lot of people in the comment sections on these videos and maybe other YouTubers really like to hype this up. They say that it's completely unusable and it's blurry and it's horrible. That's not the case. It only has a very slight, relatively unnoticeable impact. So don't be too worried about this. It's certainly not a reason to rule out a 4K monitor. Now at this price range, you're generally also getting some kind of USB-C 1 cable functionality and a built-in USB hub. The advantages of this I've already spoken about in this video. I personally love it. If I'm using a monitor with my MacBook, I want that functionality. And if you don't already have some kind of desktop dock, this is also going to save you some money. It's going to be there's about $100 price difference between a monitor that does have this functionality and a monitor that does not. So it saves you having to go out and spend money to buy an extra accessory. Again, if you have a desktop Mac, this is not relevant to you. Now, these are some of my recommendations in this whole 4K USB-C monitor category. Now, first up, you have the LG Ultrafine range. Now, this is a really, really popular monitor range. So this particular one here is, I believe, the most recent one, the UP 850. If I find a more recent one that came out in 2024 or something, I'll link that down below. But this is one that I've purchased, that I've reviewed, that I've used on the channel. Really solid monitor. LG is also typically going to be priced a little bit cheaper than the Dell variants. Some of the downsides of LG though is the build quality is a little less premium. The connectivity as well isn't quite as good as the Dells. So for example, this one here, you can see the port selection there. There's really not that much, so you can't really plug basically anything in there. But it's just a really overall solid, relatively budget monitor. You get all the good stuff like the really good color accuracy, the USB-C charging, I believe up to 90 watts. Now, if you have a little bit more budget, this is probably what I'd recommend, is the Dell U2723QE. Again, awful names, I apologize. Now this one is kind of similar to the LG Ultrafine range, but I personally prefer this, even though it is a little bit more expensive, although it's not that much more expensive. This has also been out for about 2 or 3 years at this point, so you should be able to find some pretty good discounts on it. Now the advantages of this monitor over the Ultrafine, for example, is the port selection is just insane. You get a ton of connectivity options, heaps of USB ports. There's another quick access port on the bottom, which is going to give you USB-A and USB-C. And it also has a Ethernet port on the back, which is just insane to me. Now, Dell has actually just released a brand new updated 2025 version of the U2723QE. This is the new one, the U2725QE. Now this new 2025 version has a number of really awesome improvements over the 2023 version. So most notably is going to be the refresh rate has been increased from 60 Hertz to 120 Hertz. So it now perfectly matches that ProMotion display on your MacBook Pro. You also get Thunderbolt 4 connectivity. So anything you plug into the back of the monitor is going to connect to your MacBook via that one USB-C cable at Thunderbolt 4 speeds. And also that USB-C one cable functionality has now been increased to provide about 140 watts of charge capability to your MacBook. So if you have one of those really big 16-inch MacBook Pros and you're rendering something or playing a game or something, this is going to be able to provide plenty of juice to keep it charged and also charge it during those demanding sessions. But yeah, I think this could potentially be the best MacBook monitor that you can buy right now. I've just bought it from Dell a couple of days ago. It arrived literally the day before shooting this video, so I'm still testing it to other monitors. I'm still reviewing it. That review will come out soon. But yeah, if it's not going to be number one, it's definitely going to be top 3 in my opinion, but stay tuned. Now, quick note about gaming monitors and MacBooks. You absolutely can use them together. However, I mostly recommend this particular setup for those who have a dual system setup. So for example, you have a Mac and you also have some kind of gaming device like an Xbox or a PlayStation or a Windows gaming PC. The response times are going to be much better than the productivity-oriented monitors. You're obviously getting higher refresh rates. The only real negatives are, again, like I mentioned before, the color accuracy generally isn't that great, and the productivity features like the hub or the USB-C functionality just generally aren't there. I've used multiple gaming monitors with my Macs over the last couple of years, haven't had any issues. It just depends on your particular setup. Now, ultra-wide monitors are also a really popular category here. Now, some of the advantages include obviously the increased productivity, so you can fit multiple windows side by side. This is really awesome for doing research or writing stuff because you can have 2 or 3 Google Chrome tabs open, your emails, and like a Word document. And also, a lot of people prefer the ultra-wide to, say, a dual monitor setup because you don't get those huge bezels right in the middle. Now, for me personally, I did use an ultra-wide monitor for a number of years before ultimately going back to just your standard like 16:9 aspect ratio monitor. I didn't really have any major issues with it. There were just some really annoying little things like screen recording, full screen stuff. Some of the apps I used weren't supported, but mostly I just didn't take advantage of all of the extra screen real estate. I just would sometimes just have one window open in front of me and just, I don't know, I just didn't really use all of it. Your mileage may vary. A lot of people love ultra wides, but I go into more detail on my experience on ultra wides in this particular video if you're interested. So this brings me to the final and most premium category, which is the 5K resolution monitors. Now, the price range of these monitors are going to be anywhere from say $700 up to the Apple Studio display, which is $1,599. And this is a really hot monitor segment right now because you've got a lot of really big brands entering the 5K resolution monitor market for the first time. So you have Asus, you've also got brands like BenQ and also ViewSonic, and they're all starting to make 5K monitors. Now, aside from the relatively poorly reviewed Viewfinity S9 from Samsung that came out a while ago, the other 5K monitor available at the time of this video is the Asus ProArt PA27JCV. Now, I've reviewed this monitor. I do really like it, particularly that 5K resolution. Like, it just makes text and UI elements seem really clear and crispy. That 5K resolution is really perfect for designers or just those who need perfect scaling, and of course that Retina pixel density of around 220 pixels per inch, or PPI, which is of course very similar to the Retina screens on MacBooks. I also found it to have very slightly better color accuracy compared to the Apple Studio Display, which is twice the price, which I found kind of funny. The Asus also has USB-C functionality, but a very basic hub. But the new 5K resolution BenQ will have Thunderbolt 4. If you want to check out my full review on the Asus monitor, you can watch this one. Now, some of the negatives of this 5K monitor category is, with the exception of the Apple Studio Display, which of course, Apple being Apple doesn't really go on discount or sale. These 5K resolutions from the other brands like Asus and BenQ, for example, they're so new at the moment that it's gonna take a while for that price to drop and get discounted. And in fact, like I said before, the Asus PA27JCV, again, awful name, is the only monitor out now. The BenQ is not out. I'm not sure if the ViewSonic is out. And there are other monitors coming from other brands, but they haven't been announced yet. Now, another negative is all of these 5K monitors are only 60 Hertz. So there's currently no 5K and 120 Hertz monitor options out there, and there probably won't be for a while, because if you think about how much processing power and bandwidth it takes to push not only a 5K resolution, which is 77% more pixels than 4K, but also at twice the refresh rate. That's a lot of bandwidth. So we'll see, maybe Apple's gonna come out with one. Also, the hub selection often isn't great depending on the model, and there's usually no additional features like good speakers and built-in webcam like the Apple Studio Display. And that of course brings me to the Apple Studio Display. So it is a really good monitor. The build quality is exceptional. The speakers are really, really good. It's got a built-in webcam. You've got Thunderbolt 4 connectivity on the back. Overall, it's just a really solid monitor. But as you probably already know, you got to pay for it. So if I go to the Apple website, they currently have two monitors. Obviously the Pro Display XDR, which is $5,000. So I think we'll just rule that out from this video. We won't cover it because that's only for maybe 0.01% of the population. The Studio Display, it starts at $15.99, and you have a couple of different options here. So the standard glass or the nano texture glass, and then the stand, if we choose the standard glass, you get some different stand options here. So if you want the same tilt and height adjustable stand as pretty much all the other monitors featured in this video, you have to pay extra. So that's gonna cost you $19.99. But if you're okay with just the non-height adjustable stand that just has tilt adjust, or you would like a VESA mount, it's gonna be $15.99. And I personally would prefer the VESA mount. It's just gonna give you a lot more flexibility because you can go out and get a really, really good quality monitor arm and just slap the Studio Display on there rather than spending $300 US on a piece of metal that essentially goes up and down. Now, some of the other negatives of the Apple Studio Display is it's still 60 Hertz, like I mentioned before, and also it just doesn't really work that well with Windows. Yes, you'll still be able to display an image from a Windows computer, but it's just a bit clunky and I really don't recommend it. Of course, not an issue if you are only using a Mac. But yeah, honestly, I really do like the Apple Studio Display. I think it's a great monitor, great quality, great features, but the value proposition just isn't there. Like at $15.99, that is a lot of money, and you can pretty much buy, let's see, 700 times 2, $1,400. You can buy two of these Dell UltraSharp 27-inch 4K monitors, the brand new 2025 version, and still have money left over for some accessories. So yeah, good monitor, value proposition, not really there in my opinion. Now here's my personal recommendations for each monitor type and price bracket. I'll also link all of them down below. Also, here's a brief justification for each recommendation so you don't have to listen to me waffle on for any longer. Just pause the video if you want to read. Now for me personally, right now I'm using that new 2025 monitor from Dell, the U2725QE, and I'm just trying to decide if I prefer that 120 Hertz ProMotion-like refresh rate versus the 5K resolution on some of the other monitors like the Apple Studio Display or the Asus ProArt PA27JCV.